you an expert, entrepreneur, or small business owner passionate about helping people through life's transitions? The Fresh Starts Expert membership is perfect for you. For just $55 per month, this dynamic membership is designed to boost your business and amplify your brand. Fresh Starts is here to provide you with business development, marketing, coaching, networking, publicity, community engagement, and more. With an SEO-optimized profile, exclusive press opportunities, and weekly co-working and business coaching sessions, you'll connect, grow, and gain visibility like never before. Are you ready to elevate your brand? We can't wait to work with you. Visit freshstartsregistry.com and become a Fresh Starts expert today.
Welcome back to A Fresh Story, the podcast where we have conversations about brave decisions to start over again. I'm Olivia.
And I'm Jenny. And we're so glad you're here today.
Paige is a working mother of 4 who uses her platform on TikTok and Instagram to share her thoughts on the mental load, parenting, and her career. Her goal is to raise awareness about the mental load of motherhood and advocate for equitable relationships for couples. Additionally, Paige is a passionate advocate for affordable and accessible childcare options, working to make family life more manageable for all. And we're talking to Paige on International Women's Day, which is a good kind of like way to kick off International Women's Day, because we talk a lot, especially about mental load. We could talk forever about that. So I think Paige is one of those people. Jenny and I both found you on TikTok independently, and then we were like, wait, are you watching Paige? I'm watching Paige. And then we both were like, we got to get her on the podcast. So we're really happy to have you here today.
Oh, thank you so much. Yeah, no, I've been following you as well, and I'm excited to be here.
Awesome.
How are you doing today?
I'm good. It's Friday. Friday's a good day. I don't have to make lunches on Friday. It's pizza day at school.
Yes, it is pizza day. I know. It's so exciting.
Yeah, so it's a good day for mom on Fridays. So yeah, it's a good day. It's sunny here, and I'm feeling good.
Good.
Awesome.
Good. Well, why don't you take us back to the beginning of your Fresh Start story?
Sure. Yeah, I think there's been a few times in life where I feel like I've given myself a fresh start. And I say that because I think I've actively made a choice to kind of have fresh starts for myself. But I think the most significant one that I've had was probably almost 2 years ago, which was finding myself again in motherhood and marriage, which has really led me to where I am today and to the platform that I have. But I became a mother through foster care. I was a foster mother and ultimately became an adoptive mother when I was 29 and only 6 months prior to the world shutting down. And so I became a mother at a really crazy time. And because the world shut down, my whole life, as did everyone's, flipped upside down completely.
Yeah.
And so during the pandemic, I went on to have 2 biological children. And so we went, my husband and I, from no kids to 4 kids in 3 years, a global pandemic. My husband works outside of the home. He works a lot of hours. And I became the default parent. I became the default for everything in our house. I even sold our own house at 38 weeks pregnant without a realtor. Like, I took on everything on my own during that time in life. And I'm really good at doing a lot of things. I always say I'm a doer. I can do things. I can do as many things as you throw at me, I can do. But after my 4th baby, and this sounds crazy, but after my 4th baby was born, I had enough. I was done. I felt taken advantage of. I felt unseen. I felt burnt out. I felt so much resentment, and I hated my life. I loved my kids. And I had created a world that I thought that I wanted, right? I had a job. I had 4 kids. I had a husband. I had a beautiful house. I had all these things. But I'd never been more unhappy. And a lot of it was stemming from the unequal division of labor in my marriage. Yeah. And I love my husband. We've been together since we were 16. We've been together a very long time. And I knew we didn't have to be that way. But I ultimately felt that I had to make the change myself. And so my fresh start started on a day where my whole morning went wrong, essentially. My husband didn't do any of the things he was going to do, that he said he was going to do. I had a baby on my chest. I was getting a 2-year-old dressed. My older kids were fighting. And the diaper genie was full and I couldn't get it out. And when I tried to pull it out, I sliced my finger open, right? I'm bleeding everywhere. And I go downstairs and my dishwasher isn't emptied. And the kids are yelling and their favorite cups are in the dishwasher. And I'm just, I'm losing it, right? I'm losing it. I'm just crumbling on the inside. And that day my partner came home and I said, hey, you're either on board to change this or I'm out. I am done. I don't care to do this alone. I don't care to do this without recognition. I don't care to do this without a partner. Because if I'm going to do it without a partner, then I'm just going to do it by myself because you actually create more work for me. And so that was the start of my fresh start. That was the day I decided I'm not living like this anymore. I'm not going to be the default parent. I'm not going to be the person to pick up everything for my partner because I'm better at it. I'm not going to do everything for everyone anymore. I'm done. I am so done. And so I won't say it was a graceful fresh start. It wasn't pretty.
They rarely
as
ever
I'm sure
are.
I don't think they ever are, but this one wasn't for sure. It was a lot of yelling and crying and sleepless nights. And we're 2 years out from that, and I'm still happily married. And I can say I'm happy now, right? And that's the beauty. I'm out of the baby phase. I'm no longer 2 months postpartum. I think so much has changed, but it was a lot of hard work. I put a lot of time, and I say that I put a lot of time and effort into it. It really was on me, and which is not, I talk a lot about this. It's not fair. It shouldn't be that way. Our partner should be very involved, but it wasn't like that. And so it really took a lot of time and effort on my part to get us here. And some of that looked like me continuing therapy and doing lots of therapy. And some of that looked like me sharing my experience on social media, which has also landed me where I am today, which I'm really thankful for. But that was my fresh start. I decided to try to erase the 4 years prior that had led to that point and say, hey, this isn't okay. Let's have a do-over. We're going to do a do-over. We're going to start fresh. We're going to try this different. We're going to reset. We're going to change the way we operate as a family and as a home because I want to be happy. Yeah. And I want you to be happy because my partner also wasn't happy, right? Because, when one person's not happy, nobody's really happy. And so that was it. That's where we started. And it was a long journey, but that's how we kicked it off.
I have a million questions. Do you have a million questions too, Olivia?
I do, but what I always like to do is I like
go back to the beginning.
Let's go back to the beginning.
Yeah.
So Jenny and I are both doers. Also, we are doers.
And I saw on your social media you are like you're like an operations person.
Yes.
Yeah, me too. Which is hard because when you're an operations person, it's hard to not do that in all aspects of your life.
Yeah, my original, my personal Instagram bio used to say the COO at home and at work because that's what I was, right? Yeah. It was my job to make sure everything works.
Yep. Same. Yeah. Okay. So sorry, take it back.
So where did that come from? Because that's a kind of person that is not necessarily. Some of us are born that way, but most of us are made that way, right? So where did that come from?
Yeah.
Well, I'm the eldest daughter of 4, so I think eldest daughter syndrome.
Yeah, me too.
Here. I am a twin, but I definitely was the one who kind of took on the eldest position.
Yeah.
And my parents divorced when we were 11. So I think because of that, and living with a single mom, and my dad was still around, but living with a single mom, I was parentified in a way, right? In the sense that it was my job to make sure everybody got to the bus stop on time. And it was my job to make sure when I had a car that everybody was at school on time. And so I just became responsible for everything and everyone at that point in time. And I will say I did reject that hard with my family in my 20s. I basically, they used to call me like Switzerland. I'm like, I'm out. You guys figure this out. I'm done. I've done my time. It's my 20s. I'm over it. And my younger sister kind of stepped into that slot. And I'm like, sorry, girl, that's, your choice. I'm out. But I weirdly fell so back into that when I became a mom, right? I really tried to stay out of it in my 20s and take time for myself and not be that eldest daughter. Who cares if my brother didn't buy mama Mother's Day present? Like, that's not my problem, right?
Yeah.
I really took myself out of that. But then as a mother, I couldn't remove myself from that ingrained behavior within me, right? Because these were my kids. This was my home. And I made the choice to have them. And so I fell right back into it.
Wow, Paige, we might have the same story. We have the same life, literally the same life. Yeah, it's so interesting because yes, to everything you just said. And, I think so much of that doer is a trauma response, right? To trying to fix and make and create this.
Well, yeah,
life.
It's a certain kind of personality that's born, and then it can either be fostered up or fostered down, right? Like,
sure.
And I think for me too, I'm the same way. And it's like, I am very organized. I am very on top of it. That's who I am. And then if you're like, well, here's a little bit of responsibility, or here's somebody to take care of, or here's how you're going to prove your worth as a woman and as a wife, I'm like, okay, that feeds me really well. That feeds my system really well. So I think it can sort of, depending on situations, be brought up or brought down.
Yeah, I was definitely born like this. Like I would lay my clothes out on my bed at night at like 5, right? Like I was always reorganizing my room. This was who I was. It is who I am. But amplified, right, in those situations, right? It no longer became who I was. It became my responsibility. I think that was the difference. It was no longer just about how Paige acts. It was, okay, now we're actually going to ask her to do this, not just let her do this.
Yeah, it's interesting too. I see there's like, this is just from my own sociological study of our own family, but that when daughters have to like parent their siblings, they burn out much faster as mothers, right? Than people who didn't. We actually talk about this with our own grandmother who mothered her younger sister and really didn't want to have kids, actually.
Interesting.
By the time, because she was like done. She's like, I took care of this. So I felt the same way. I burnt out really early too, and also I think that there is something to be said for like, you kind of understood motherhood, but not fully. And so it's like a real mind fuck because you're like, I thought I knew what was happening. Did you experience that at all?
I did. I had been a nanny. I'd worked in daycares. I'd, been in a family with 4 kids. I felt like I got it. I was like, I get this. I know what I have to do. And I was really good at taking care of the kids. That wasn't the hard part. What I wasn't expecting was everything else, right? The mental load of it all, the never ending to-do list, the fact that I was now like emotionally regulating my partner. It was all the things that really didn't have to do with the kids, right? That come with parenthood because I felt really prepared and ready for parenthood. And my husband is a very active participant, a very active dad, but parenthood really shook him and, it really brought out anxiety for him, right? Like a lot of anxiety and 4 kids are loud and chaotic and it can really stress him out. And I was like, wow, I'm parenting them. I'm parenting him. I am parenting everyone. And I remember saying to him one day, but what about me? What if I break down? What if I lose it? Who steps up for me? Who's here for me? Nobody. I was like, there's nobody here. Nobody coming here to help me. And I'm tired and I need help.
Yeah. 100%.
So you met your husband, you started dating your husband at 16.
Yes.
Can you tell us a little bit about that?
Yeah. It was like a typical high school, right? So he took my best friend to semi-formal. And I remember I know, right? And I didn't even know who he was. I was like, okay, cool, whoever he is. He was like a bagger at the grocery store. I'm like, whatever, bring him along.
Very Gilmore Girls.
I know, right? And so we chatted and afterwards I remember her saying like they weren't dating or anything. They just went to semi together and her being like, oh, every time I message him on AIM, he doesn't really answer. And I remember being like, oh, weird. He's talking to me. Like he's talking to me. And she was like, oh, weird. But typical high school, I was like not into it. I was like, he's my friend. I don't want to date him.
Yeah.
Whatever. And after like a year and a half of that, we ended up dating and didn't stop. He was my constant, right? I came from a family with a lot of trauma and a lot going on in my teens, and not just with my parents' divorce, but just a lot of personal things going on. And he was my like rock. He was my person. I would go eat dinner at his parents' house, and I would, I would be with him and his family. And we broke up briefly my freshman year of college for like 2 months, and that rocked me to my core more than anything had ever rocked me, because I was like, oh my gosh, this was the person who wasn't tumultuous, right? He wasn't causing problems in my life. He was only fixing them and helping me, and he was there for me. And I remember like truly falling to pieces over that.
Yeah.
I was also 18, 19, and it was my first real heartbreak. But
serious though.
Yeah. It was a serious heartbreak. And we ended up getting back together 2 months later and, got married after 10 years together and started having kids. And at this point, we've been together 18 years, which sounds crazy. I've been with him more than half my life. I don't necessarily recommend it to young people. Like, don't marry your high school sweetheart. I mean, I'm really lucky because he was incredibly supportive. After I graduated college, I went to school for broadcast journalism. So maybe it's not surprising I've ended up on social media. And I had an opportunity, or I was giving myself the opportunity. I said, I want to move to LA and I want to try it. I want to live there. I want to work in entertainment. That's what I want to do. But I was really afraid to leave him. Right. Like he was my person and he was my everything. And I was like, I don't want to leave. And he was the one who was like, you got to do it. He's like, you have to do it. I'll be here. We'll do this. And I lived in LA for 2 full years without him. We did long distance, and it was probably the best thing for us because it allowed me to have a life outside of him, to see that I could be a person outside of my relationship with him because I was so young and I'd been with this person for so long. And I remember people asking, well, what if you guys break up? And I said, well, if we break up, we break up. I mean, this is something I want to do, and I'm not going to not do it because of him. And if he doesn't want me to do it, then maybe I shouldn't be with him. Right. And so luckily he was the one who was like, do it, go, do it now. Like, you just graduated college. What better time to do it? You're 22, go. And I went. And so I went. And it was the best, such a fun 2 years. I kind of, I had my fun in LA for sure. I was really, really studious in college. And so then when I got to LA, I was like, I'm going to have some fun.
Love it.
It was appropriate. LA is a fun place. And so it was a great time. And so, we've really been through some different evolutions together too. And so this parenting journey, I would say, is by far our hardest. It was the first time that I was saying things like I might be done. Right. In our marriage, or that I'm not sure I'm happy in this. But it's been almost 20 years. Right. And we've gone through many, many evolutions of who we are and what our life looks like. And I probably could never have predicted all of this.
So
sure.
It must have been, what was it like before the kids, like domestic equity wise? Like, were you already taking that on and didn't really realize it because it's easier when there are no babies around, or was it more balanced? And then my second question, which I'm going to throw out there so I don't forget it, is having him be your rock for all those years, be your calm person. It must have been very scary and shocking for you when suddenly parenthood throws him for this loop.
Yeah. Yes. So before kids, we definitely had a very equitable relationship. I'd say the inequity came in our earnings, right? My husband he's a blue collar guy. And so he started right out of high school, basically like 18, 19. He got his job that he's still in now, and was making a ton of money. It's a dangerous job. So he gets paid very well, works a lot of hours. He's had a 401k since he was 18. I'm like, geez, like I'll never catch up. Right. And so our inequity came in the sense of finances is what I found. And so we had to have conversations around how we split our bills and how we handled all of that, because I was freshly out of college making like $40K or $30K a year. I don't even know. And he was making over $100K. And I was like, what?
Can't keep up with that.
Split rent even. And so we had those conversations, and but like the day-to-day stuff was equal. We had dogs that we shared together. We had a home, but we're two people, right? We're eating dinner together. We're cleaning together. It was really easy because we were doing it all together. But I do remember I would start to take on certain things, especially because his job required him to be working more than I did. And I would do his laundry or something. And his mom said to me before we got married, don't do his laundry. You'll learn to hate him. And I said, oh, oh, well, he's angry, right? Like I was like, oh, like, what is she so upset about? And now I get it. Right? Now I get it. Now I'm 8 years into marriage, and I get it. But when it was just the two of us, I didn't understand how the resentment can build when you are tasked and responsible for somebody else's domestic labor. But we were we shared it pretty equally until the day the kids showed up. And even I will actually say this, when our first 2 children joined us through foster care, we were still very equal. I definitely took on the bulk of childcare planning and paying of those bills and coordinating with foster care because there's a lot of visits and things like that. Yeah. Just because I'm innately better at those things. I would be happy to own those. I like to own those things. But he was a very active dad and did pick up every single day and I did drop off, right? Like we were very even. I think if the pandemic had not happened, we might not have ended up where we did. I think our domestic labor would not have become so unequal had that not happened because this narrative of like, you work from home. You're always home. Yeah. You can do these things. Why am I coming home and doing them after being out for 8 hours, but you're sitting here? You could do laundry. And he never said those things to me, but that was like the understood dynamic. Yeah.
It's also what you're selling to yourself, right? Like, totally. I want to make his life easy, like these things. Right. And then unfortunately you make your life easy into hating his life easy into hating your own life. Like it's you go all the way around.
Yeah. Which I want to talk about a little bit later when we kind of unravel that, because I think there's a big conversation there about the situation like you were in for women whose partners do have those jobs or aren't really home a lot. So I want to jump back there. But you can keep going because I'm curious on your answer about what Jenny asked about his anxiety.
Yeah. So his anxiety started showing up probably right before or right after we had kids. Like for him, he never really struggled with anxiety or anything, and neither did I. And I'm very, I have people in my family who have depression and anxiety and bipolar. Like I'm very used to mental health struggles, and I'm pretty open to them, or like understanding to them. But I hadn't had to live with somebody struggling with it, and I couldn't relate. I could not relate. I was having a really hard time empathizing with him, transparently, which I'm sure was hard for him because I'd be like, what is going on? Right? Like, what is happening? And he wasn't communicating because I don't think he knew how to communicate because for a while he didn't know it was anxiety.
Right.
He was like, right. I remember at one point he's like, I think I need to, he's like, I think I need to see a doctor. I think I have a brain tumor. Turns out it was anxiety. Right. And so that was really difficult. And it became, it didn't have a huge impact until the kids really were older too, right? Like toddler age when they're loud and like irrational and unreasonable and all of those things. It just became difficult for me because I remember saying, it's okay for you to feel anxious and it is okay for you to be struggling. It is not okay for you to take your emotions out on us. It is not okay for you to kind of behave in certain ways around the kids. I understand you're struggling, but your anxiety is not an excuse for certain behaviors, right? And I remember he would struggle because he wants to be an active dad and an active participant. And I would say to him, when you're anxious like this, I'd actually prefer you remove yourself. I would prefer you take a beat, go for a walk, go upstairs, leave the kitchen. Let me handle the kids because your anxiety gives them anxiety, not necessarily in the same way, but it heightens
the energy. Yeah,
it heightens everybody's emotions. And then I'm the one trying to get everybody back on a level ground. And I can't do that, right? When the other adult in the room is struggling. So we had to have a lot of conversations and that was hard for him. He's like, that makes me feel like a bad dad. I'm like, no, it makes you a good dad. If you can recognize that you are struggling in that moment and you remove yourself, then that's fine. I'm not going to be mad at you. I would prefer it. And I think the hard thing is he was hearing me say that, but in his mind, he was internalizing like, oh, she thinks I'm not up to snuff. Like I can't take care of the kids. I can't do these things. Yeah. And I want to be a good dad. Right. And I want to be here and I don't want her to think that of me. And so we had to, it was a learning period for us, but we had to kind of figure that out together and have those conversations quite often.
Yeah. Yeah. We talk a lot. We love to talk to people who kind of have had like a fresh start in their marriage because divorce is not the only option, right? You can also work on stuff if both people want to work on things. We've been talking to a lot of people lately that have had these beautiful, beautiful stories about their fresh start.
Raina Boston, do you know her?
Yeah.
She has like almost the same story. Like,
really?
She was like, the episode's going to come out soon, but like, she was like, I'm done. If you want in, get in, but if you're not going to get in, like I'm out. And I think that it's a really, I think what you said too, Olivia and I talk about this a lot about like, sometimes it's easier to parent alone than to parent around somebody that is supposed to be helpful, but is not being helpful.
Yeah. And I had gotten to a point where I was so, tired from taking care of everyone else, right? And I was burnt out and I was doing it all alone. And it felt like the responsibility was all mine. And I had all this resentment, right? And so I didn't even enjoy being with him because whenever I was with him, I was fuming about all of the things that I felt like I was not being recognized for, and not recognized in the way that I needed a pat on the back, but that they weren't even seen.
Yeah.
Like, he didn't realize that I had just taken kids to 3 different doctor's appointments in a week. He didn't even know.
Right.
And I'm like, that's crazy that you don't know that, right? That you don't know all of these things.
Yeah.
And, you know, the typical, well, just tell me. And I'm like, oh.
Make me a list.
Right.
Yeah, exactly. So I always say this to people because I tell people I'm not a therapist. I'm not a coach. I am just sharing my experience. But when people do ask me, you know, how do you get through it? How do you make it work? My number one thing is you have to have a willing partner and a partner that you trust. Like, I had been with him at that point for 16 years. I knew him, right? I knew him. Yeah. I had known him since we were kids. It's not like I just met him 4 years ago. Like, I felt like I knew everything about him, and I knew how much he loved me, and I knew how much he loved the kids, and I could see him struggling. Like, I could see him struggling. But I also knew that I had to protect myself, right? Like, I could feel myself becoming a person and living a life I didn't want. And I, as much as I loved him, I couldn't continue to do that. I had to worry about myself and my kids. And so, you know, I did have that conversation with him, but I think in my heart, I knew he was going to do the work. I knew he wouldn't let it go, or tell me that he didn't care or expect me to get over it. I knew I had a partner who wanted to do good. And I think that's the biggest part, which is people will always say, especially on social media, like, you married the bad guy, you married the wrong guy, you didn't do enough of your research before you had kids with this guy. You should have known he was going to be like this. But society tells men who they are in a lot of ways. And it's very difficult to know, especially in parenthood, how your partner will react. It really is very difficult. And I don't think it's fair to place I know it's not fair to place the blame on women, but I also think it is unrealistic to expect every man to be able to course correct on their own, because they're not being told what it is to be a father. I asked that on social media once. I said, what were you told about being a dad before you became one? And all these men said nothing. Nobody told me anything. Like, I watched my dad. I saw what he did that I liked or that I didn't like, and I tried to emulate or not emulate my parents. But nobody says to you, this is what it takes to be a good dad. Whereas moms, it's like, if you don't breastfeed, then you're a bad mom. And if you don't do this, then you're a bad mom.
It's an overwhelm of information. And with men, it's like nothing. Yeah.
Exactly. And so, you know, I don't love the narrative that you just have to write it off. You just have to leave. Because I think, you know, I'm a child of divorce. I know that it was better for my parents to be divorced. I'm appreciative that they got divorced. I think my life is better for it. But I didn't want to get divorced, and I didn't actually think my life would be better for it in the long run. I really thought that we could work on it. And I think you have to have those conversations and be honest with yourself, because unfortunately there are men out there who aren't going to change and are not going to recognize their partners. And you have to it's hard to be that self-aware to see that, right, when you're in the moment, because you don't want to see it. But
you have to do a lot of questioning and a lot of research, and you don't know you don't know which way a guy's going to go when you marry him. And I think to know your partner that well, and to have the love, like, there were so many other signifiers in the relationship that it was worth it to hold on. Right. And I think when I think of like your story versus like Olivia's story, which, you know, not similar in a lot of ways, but similar in the way of like, she had all of the domestic equity, but also there was this emotional abuse, but also, you know, so it's like, I think if, you know, and I was engaged to somebody where I did everything. Like, I was the default parent. We didn't have any kids. And, and I was like, and if I had felt like, oh, we've had these conversations and he's trying and he's making efforts and I know that he loves me so much, that you have to have those other signifiers in the relationship that tell you to hold on. But not everybody knows how to like sort of dig deep into those. And you have to learn how to communicate with your partner on a big enough level to sort of have those conversations and then make the game time decision of like, do I stay or do I go? Yeah. And I think that's really where my platform has come from on social media too, which is my goal. People always ask me like, what are you? Who are you? Why do you do this? And I'm like, I just landed here. This wasn't intentional, really, honestly. But my goal, you know, a year and a half into it is to help other women and men articulate what they're experiencing. Because I think the hardest part for me was for a really long time, I didn't have words to put to what I felt. I knew I was mad. I knew I was frustrated. I knew I wasn't feeling love at that time. I couldn't tell you why.
right? I couldn't say, oh, wow, the domestic labor is really unequal here. Or like, I'm doing all this emotional regulation. Like I couldn't say those things to my partner. I didn't know how to say those things to my partner. And so the reason I talk about it and share it is because I want other people, and I've heard from enough people that just being able to have the words, right? They'll say, oh my gosh, like I couldn't put my finger on how to say it and you just said it. Yeah. And now I feel like I can say it to my partner. Yeah. And I think that's really what the beauty of what's come out of this for me, which is, I went to school for journalism. I'm somewhat of a communicator. Yeah. And so that's a blessing because in my marriage, once I found the words, I could communicate them. I could talk to him effectively and have conversations without screaming and yelling and crying. I could talk to him. But sometimes when you can't find the words, it can be really hard to stay level-headed and have productive conversations. And you really need to have those to figure your way out of this one.
So what? Go ahead, Jenny.
I think that like these conversations about domestic equity, to your point, are so important because it's giving a name for all of this. And I think I had those conversations so often with my ex of like, I can't keep making dinner for the rest of my life. Like this is going to kill me. And I didn't know what that was. I didn't know what to call it. I didn't know what to say. Like I used to say, well, of course I'm the one that messes everything up. I'm the one that does everything. If you did anything, you would mess something up too sometimes. And I didn't know what to call it. And then to now be able to be like, I think that if I was still in that relationship, which thank God I'm not, I think I would be able to come to him and be like, our domestic labor is inequitable. And we need, and that's a much different conversation than just like throwing my hands up when I'm making dinner and being like, I can't do this anymore. I'm going to go crazy. Right. So I think about like maybe 2-3 years ago when like Laura Danger was coming up and now you're coming up, like all of these conversations are bringing it to really the forefront of everybody's minds of like talking about it in a sort of unemotional, practical way, which I think benefits relationships very well. Right.
I think so. Yeah. My audience is mostly women, which is not surprising. Yeah. And the overwhelming response is, yes, I just needed the words to say this thing, right? Yeah. Unfortunately, the overwhelming response from men is defensiveness, but it's not surprising, right? That we're essentially saying they're hearing I'm not good enough or I'm not doing enough, and it takes a lot of work to remove the emotion from the conversation. Because I remember saying to my partner, I am not saying you're a bad dad. I'm saying I need you to do camp sign up. Right. And those are two separate things. Let's not conflate those things. Yes, exactly. And so I can be overwhelmed and still think you're a good partner. I can need you to do more domestic labor and still think you're a good dad, right? Those things don't have to be so intertwined. They can be different. And I think it hurts the ego to hear that you're not doing enough. And I think that's the hardest part about these conversations. And especially with finances involved and depending on whether or not somebody's a stay-at-home parent or a working parent, there's conversations around, well, I go out and earn all the money, or, I make more money and therefore my job has to take more of a priority over the labor in the home. And, I want women in particular, but everybody to know that their time is equal and valuable, right? Your paid time is not more important than my unpaid time. And so, we need to normalize that conversation because it's a very common one.
Well, that's the question I want to ask before we let you go today is, what do you do, right? If you're in the situation that maybe you are, let's say, you are a very common kind of, I guess, dynamic we're seeing lately is a mom that's home. She maybe has a remote job and, makes, I don't know, $60,000 a year. Let's just throw it out there, right? And he's out there, like you said, and he's making $100K plus and he's working, 80 hours a week. And so how do you make that work? Right. And obviously there's a million answers to this, but from what you have done on your platform, what have you seen are ways that you can actually bring the domestic equity back into play when there is so much inequity with time?
Sure. I think first reframing the time, right? They might work more hours, but they are only able to work more hours because you don't, right? And so that could change, right? You could get a job opportunity that surpasses their income, that requires more time of you. And would they be willing in that instance to do what you do, to support you? Would they be willing? Because I think that's a big part of this conversation. Let's flip the switch. Let's see what it would be like if we reversed our places in this home. Because that is really what it comes down to, right? There's this premium on paid work, and men often in families will say like, well, I work 80 hours a week. You expect me to do the dishes, but I'm not even home. And again, the reason you're able to work 80 hours a week and have a family and have children and have a home is because you have a partner. You could work 80 hours a week and have none of those things, and that's not a problem. Go do that. That's totally fine. But don't use that as an excuse to not participate in parenting and in your home, and especially with kids. I think there's this big conversation. I've gotten into some like heated debates on it, but around like I said, doctor's appointments. I was at a doctor's appointment and some dad like did not know any developmental history for his son. He didn't know anything. And people were like, well, his job's to work and her job's to do that. And I'm like, medical stuff for your kids, you don't get a pass on that for having a job. You just don't, right? A high earning woman still knows everything about her child's medical history. That is not an excuse to not know your kids.
And if she didn't, she would get like, you know,
oh my gosh.
Like it would be awful. She'd be the worst mother ever.
Exactly. And so it's like that whole, there's those memes where it's like dad pushing a stroller, good dad, mom pushing a stroller, bad mom because there's a phone next to her or something, right? Like the standards are so different. And so I think first and foremost, you kind of have to talk about equity of time and how their time is not more valuable, right? You need to have this conversation. And then I think for us, what worked was I had read Fair Play, and we did a version of the Fair Play method by Eve Rodsky. So if you haven't done that, you know, I think it's interesting. Even if you don't do it to a T, I think it has some really interesting thoughts and systems that you can utilize. I took a version of that. And basically what we said was, you know, we laid out every single task. And I have a spreadsheet, which I offer to people who follow me, obviously, a spreadsheet. And it
makes you feel safe. I get it.
Yeah. It shows every task that the way we did it was we had a column for the current situation. Every task mom was doing, every task dad was doing. And then what did that look like? And I think I had like 65 and he had like 10, right? And I'm like, oh, does this feel equitable? Not really, right? And so then we worked to decide how we were going to divvy that up. And ours is definitely not equal. I still do the bulk. I am definitely still the primary parent. I'm the person who takes on more because I work from home and because I have a more flexible job. But we also have this weird luxury where we're equal earners. So there is no conversation around like he earns more. We're very equal in that sense, which makes the conversation a little bit easier. But in order for him to earn, he has to work a ton of overtime. He has to work all of these different hours. And so I then sacrifice, right? Like I have to sacrifice.
But you're not going out and hanging out with your girlfriends. You're home with your kids, right?
Exactly. Right. And so, we had to really work on that and talk about kind of where our strengths lied, who could do what did that look like, and what was going to be the most impactful thing we could do for each other,
right?
And play to your strengths, and then see what's working and what's not working. Reevaluate as you go. I think the second step to that, which we don't talk about often though, is or as often is free time or time for rest or recreation or socialization. I felt like I wasn't getting any opportunity for that for myself, and neither was my partner. He wasn't either. Because we had this weird thing where it's like, okay, we're working and then we have to get home and we have to do our fair share and we're all doing our fair share. And that also means we can't ever have time for ourselves because then the other person gets more. And so we were having that conversation too. And now we actually have it built into our weekly calendar. Like Monday and Wednesday nights are mom's nights. I go to yoga. I go to Pilates. I go to dinner with a girlfriend. I leave at dinner. So like I eat dinner, my kids eat dinner and I am with them. And then he tackles bedtime on his own. And I come home later. And then he gets out of work earlier than me. He gets out at like 3:30 if he gets out on time. And so he'll have like 2 to 3 hours in the afternoon on Tuesdays and Thursdays where he can just do whatever he wants. And I feel like a person again. Like I feel like I have purpose. I feel like I have energy, right? It's not, I want to emphasize that it's not just about sharing tasks equitably. It's time. It's really time. Are you both getting time to be people outside of parenthood, outside of your marriage? And are you getting time together, right? That's also important. But oftentimes we prioritize that. We'll find date nights. We'll find time together. Right. Everything else is for the kids. And then there's no time for the individual person. And it's so important to be a person outside of work and outside of your family because ultimately that's who made you, right? And you need those things to feel, at least I do. I need those things to feel like a whole well-rounded person who's excited to wake up in the morning, right? That is important to me. And so that's another layer that I definitely encourage people to figure out.
It's also important for your kids to see you having that. You know, it's so important. It's important for your sons and daughters to see a woman prioritizing herself. And it's important for your sons and daughters to see their dad doing that too. I also wonder how their relationship with their dad changed. I mean, you said he was a very involved dad, but like, I think that when you allow somebody to invest more in the position, things blossom. Have you seen that?
Yeah, I think so. You know, last night my husband was like, I got trapped with the toddler because she's crazy right now. But she only wanted him, right?
Yeah.
Like she wanted him to do Tubby. She wanted him to do her PJs. She wanted him to read her stories. Like they're so used to him owning certain parts of this that
I love that.
It's not a question, right? It's not like, oh, it's mama who does Tubbies. It's no, it's dad too. And he wanted dad. And so it's nice. I think before, you know, kids will say that you often hear kids say like, oh, my mom loves to cook. And it's like, does mom love to cook or does mom just always cook? My husband cooks every dinner. Pretty much. I cook all the other meals. So people, whenever I say that, men are like, so what do you do? It's like, well, there's two other meals in the day that I handle. But he cooks dinners, right? And so my kids are going to grow up seeing a dad cooking dinner every single night and helping to clean every single night. And it is very normal in our house. I think it would be strange for them if it was a situation where dad just walked in and mom served him dinner every night. They'd be like, oh, what's going on?
I lived that. So I understand it is weird. It's weird. It was weird for the people doing it. And it was weird. And it sets kids up. It doesn't set kids up for a good experience in life.
It will color how they view the world, right? And what they expect in the future. And so, you know, I only have one son. I have 3 daughters. And so I want to make sure that all of them understand what equity looks like in a relationship. And so I'm not just telling my daughters to, you know, put their clothes away in the closet and keep it organized. I'm telling my son too, like, this is not how we throw clothes in a hamper. Okay. Yeah. This is what that looks like.
Yeah. I want to call out 2 things that I love that you said before we finish up with you. One is that I love that you said that you kind of prioritized the children as part of this domestic labor equity conversation. And like you said, that, you know, medical stuff and all of those things. And so much, you know, it's not going to ever be 50-50. Like you're doing the garbage this day and I'm doing the garbage this day. Right. But it's like, what's important for that family unit that you figure it out. And I really love that you said that because people are so black and white, right? And we're like, no, there's a lot of colors into this conversation. And the other thing that I think my brain is like ticking as you're talking is we love to romanticize marriage, right? Oh, marriage is so beautiful. Marriage is also a business, right?
Totally.
And a household is a business and it's okay. And I think going back to what you said before about when your husband's like, but does that mean I'm a bad dad because I don't do X, Y, Z? The two have nothing to do with each other, right? And it's okay for us culturally to say, we got to figure out the business of this household. It doesn't take away from the romance and the love and all of those things, but they're 2 separate entities, right? And I think that's a really important conversation that you do so beautifully on social media, is talking about like that. Like, I almost see you as like this efficiency expert, right? That's like, you know, you're saying like, how can we get this stuff done so that we can have a beautiful, wonderful life and travel and do all of these things. So I appreciate you talking about this so much and your perspective.
Thank you.
So Paige, if somebody is going through a fresh start, what would be some wise words that you can impart to them?
Oh, that's tough. I tell everybody, get a therapist if you can.
Always.
I know that's a little privilege, right? If you have access to one, use that for sure. I think it's so important. It has been impactful in my life. I think the other thing is to have grace and patience, right? It doesn't happen overnight. I will say we're almost 2 years out from my fresh start, the day that I kind of ended living that life. And it took 2 years, you know, it took 2 years for me to feel like we were really thriving and that things were where we wanted them to be again. It was not overnight at all. And so I think it's really important to assess how far you've come when you have come far, but understand that it's okay if you're still in the thick of it, because it's not easy to change your life. It's not easy to evolve. It's not easy as an individual, but especially in a marriage or a partnership, it is very, very difficult. And then if you throw kids in, you know, whole other thing. So that's my advice, is just to kind of give yourself grace and patience, because you can't fix it in a day, a year, and sometimes even 2 years. And that's okay. You don't have to. It just needs to be improving. As long as it's improving and you're heading in the right direction, then I think that's all you can ask for.
I love that. And the last question, the hardest one, it was the last thing that you ate and truly loved.
Yeah, this is hard because as a mom, I don't really enjoy eating anymore because I do too much cooking, and it's like it only serves the purpose of fueling me so I don't pass out.
Yep,
which is terrible, right? Terrible. I wish I
it's
enjoyed.
It's a season.
You'll get back. You'll get back.
Exactly. That's my hope. But I'm a big like charcuterie board gal. A good slice of cheese is great for me. And I always go to dinner with my girlfriends, and we always get a charcuterie board, and they hate stinky cheese, but I love it. I'd say the last charcuterie board I had was really good.
Love that.
And so I'm always down for that, and I still enjoy that, right? But that's something my kids' sticky fingers haven't touched, and
for sure,
I get to eat alone. So that's always a win for me.
I love that. So where can people find you, Paige?
Yes, I am on almost all social media at She is a Paige Turner. And I also have a website, sheisapaigeturner.com.
Amazing. Thank you so much for this conversation. It is necessary and important, and we appreciate your perspective. So just keep on sharing, and we hope you come back soon to talk more.
Yeah, I would love to. Thank you so much.
Thank you for listening to today's episode. A Fresh Story podcast is produced by Fresh Starts Registry, the first and only platform for everything you need to begin again, from home items to Hype Team and everything in between. You can learn more and read today's show notes at afreshstory.com.
Are you a freelancer, solopreneur, writer, creative, or professional looking to achieve your goals within a supportive community? Have you found that working from home on your own gets lonely? That you're missing the accountability and community of a positive workplace environment? We understand. And we're so excited to introduce you to the Fresh Starts Collective. For just $35 per month, gain access to 6 daily offerings a week, including virtual co-working, open office hours for business coaching, accountability sessions, and networking opportunities. Enjoy expert workshops, monthly events, and an extensive content library. Connect with marketing, design, and writing professionals to brainstorm and grow together. Surround yourself with accountability, community, and growth. Elevate your journey with the Fresh Starts Collective for only $35 per month. Visit freshstartsregistry.com and join us today.